But I think when it comes to the AFC South, I think because of Matt Ryan being able to, he still has his intelligence, still knows where to go to football at all times. The Colts have a chance to be very successful and win the AFC South. Now, once they get to the playoffs, it's going to be a different story because of teams like the Bengals, like the Chiefs. The Raiders got better. The Buffalo Bills are looking to take that, get over that hump. So it's going to be challenging, but this might be, getting Matt Ryan might be the missing piece that the Colts need to get back into the Super Bowl picture. So
what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. I am Phillip Jordan from Last World College Football, 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer of Dothan Wolves Football. On today's podcast, it's a pretty good one. I'm going to be joined by Brian Jones from PopCulture.com. Brian is one of my regulars from dating back all the way to the radio show. We will talk about Matt Ryan to the Colts, the Atlanta Falcons, what they should do with the number 8 pick. We'll jump to some Packers talk and Aaron Rodgers as well. Final four predictions in this one. You'll get Brian's and then you'll get mine in the open. And we also talk Atlanta Braves. So a lot of Atlanta sports talk here on the podcast. Oh, and in the first couple minutes of my conversation with Brian, we will talk a little wrestling too as well. So we're jumping all over the place on this edition of the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. You can listen to the podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You get your podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube, Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for all the notifications when a new video is ready for you to watch. And if you leave a comment on a video, I will also read that on a future edition of the podcast. You can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Everybody, before I bring in Brian Jones from popculture.com to talk about a bunch of different topics here on the show, I'm going to give my Final Four preview and one or two NFL thoughts as well. I'm going to start with the first game, Kansas versus Villanova. And, of course, on Tuesday's podcast, I was joined by Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14, and he gave his preview breakdowns of these games. And a lot of stuff that Blake said I agree with. I know Villanova coming off the Houston game, they really did struggle offensively in that one, shoot 29%, 5 of 21 from 3, only 6 assists. The three-point statistic and the score was the only stats. They beat Houston in that one. Houston went 1 for 20 from downtown in that one. Jermaine Samuels was really good in that game, 16 points, 10 rebounds, and they're going to need him. Really, the front court battle is going to be very intriguing for me between Villanova and Kansas, because with Samuels up front, and then, of course, you're going to have McCormick for Kansas there as well. And then Kansas with their depth, and honestly, I'm going with Kansas here just because of their depth and what they have on the bench, because you got Abaji and then you've got McCormick, leading that group to start, but off the bench, Lightfoot and Remy Martin, also two very good players there as well. So I just like their depth, and especially now with the loss of Justin Moore for Villanova, they're the second leading scorer behind Colin Gillespie, and he did struggle against Houston. Only had like 6 points in the game. Caleb Daniels, who's averaging 11 points per game in the tournament, going to need more from him. Gillespie's going to have a big day, I think, as well. And then Samuel. So they're going to need certain players to step up for Villanova in this one. And just with everything Kansas do, their athleticism, Abaji is just at 6'5", just a tremendous, tremendous player. I don't think the Villanova guards have the athleticism to match and to limit him like they're going to need to do on Saturday night. And and Kansas coming off their best performance really of the tournament. I mean, they've had some close calls. I mean, Villanova has too, especially the second, third round games. But that game against Miami, they were down 35-29 and they beat them 76-50, outscored them 47-15 there in the second half. shooting 59%. Miami only shot 21% in that one, and they even out-rebounded Miami 25-11. So I like Kansas here to take it and head on to the national championship game. Then you have Duke versus North Carolina. This game is so big, Eric Church has canceled concerts so he can see this game, which I know the Eric Church fans are not happy about that. As crazy as successful as these two programs have been and how they're mainstays in the tournament, you would think at least at some point they would have crossed the path in the NCAA tournament, but they never have. This is the first time they had met NCAA tournament. Of course, this is every game going to could be the last game for Coach K. I mean, at the most, he has 2 games remaining. At worst, he has this game, and that's it. And just imagine if North Carolina is able to beat them again. You beat him in his final game at Cameron, and then you beat him in your last game. North Carolina fans will be able to run around and say, "Hey, we retired Coach K," and you know they wouldn't let Duke fans hear the end of it. Should be an offensive game. The over-under on this thing is 151. I know Duke is favored 4 points in this one. Up front, it should be intriguing. I think these two teams can really match up pretty well up front. Brady Manning for North Carolina, I mean, what he's doing on outside, a stretch forward to the truest form of it. He can cause problems. He's going to pull a big guy out of the paint for Duke. Banchero, I feel like he's going to have to really bring that high level. You are a guy that's projected to be a lottery pick. One of the better players, obviously, in college basketball. The best player on the floor. I mean, there's no doubt he's the best player or will be the best player on the floor in this game. Wendell Moore and Mark Williams as well up front. The battle up front between North Carolina and Duke is going to be very big for me. Who wins that between these matchups? Because I do believe is, I would say, evenly matched, but they're very close to each other. The backcourt battle, I honestly, I would give that advantage to North Carolina. Jeremy Roach for Duke has had some moments. He's hit some big shots for them here in the tournament. They're going to need some big play from him and the other guards at Duke to kind of cancel or equalize what Caleb Love and Leaky Black will do and others for North Carolina. It kind of sounds like, okay, you're favoring the guards at North Carolina. You're probably going North Carolina. I'm not. I'm going to go. I'm going to go Duke here. I just believe in the power of Coach K right now. It's going to be Duke versus Kansas in the national championship game on Monday night. All right, real quickly before we do leave the topic of the Final Four too, I did go to Facebook and Twitter on Wednesday and threw up questions, who you got, and then on Twitter I did polls to see who everybody had coming out on top of this one. Would Kansas and Villanova, not much Facebook interaction on this one, but it was 2-0. Only 2 people comment on the Kansas-Villanova matchup, and both said that they believe Kansas will beat Villanova. Now, then on Twitter, 79% picked Kansas to win and 21% picked Villanova. Now for Duke, North Carolina, had 8 commenters on that one on Facebook, and it was split 4-4 Duke and North Carolina. And then the Twitter poll favored Duke 59% to 41% for North Carolina. And my colleague over at Last Word on College Football, Kevin McGuffey, chimed in. Can I choose neither? So I guess I should have picked a C option on these Twitter polls. So there you have it. Kansas and Duke, which is the 2 teams I think is going to be there. And that seems like that's kind of where most people are going with that as well. And then finally, just a couple NFL things here on the podcast. First, NFL overtime rules for playoffs. Both teams will get a possession. That'll be interesting. As soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, I know what the strategy is probably going to be here for coaches. You're now going to want to kick the ball if you win the coin toss, because you're going to want to see what the other team does. And I know some people say, why don't you want to just take the ball first? I'll get in that real quickly. So if you kick the ball first, you now know what the other team has to do. One, the other team's not going to be in great field position. So if you can get a stop, you got good field position. But if that team does score a touchdown, goes up 7 points, the team next, the second possession, you go down the field, you score a touchdown, you're going to go for 2. Because one, you're going to think, well, if they so easily went down there the first time, they may do it again. Let's just end the game right here on a 2-point conversion. So a lot of times you may not even get to the third possession. Now, some people say, why didn't you just want to take the ball first? Now, I get that thinking. You can say, well, you score a touchdown, they score a touchdown, and then it becomes sudden death and you scored a touchdown. Well, I just don't think most teams are going to let it get to that scenario if it's matching touchdowns. I just think the second team is going to go for 2 and just try to end the game. Either it's going to end the game either way there. You're either going to lose by 1 or you're going to win by 1. And that's just going to be the strategy. And I just like that both teams will get a possession. I've always felt like that should be something that should be done in the NFL when it comes to overtime. And then news right before I was started to record here. Bruce Arians is retiring as the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Todd Bowles, the defense coordinator, will take over as the new head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was just, a few weeks ago, Tom Brady announced he was coming out of retirement. You had seen some stuff online. Maybe those two just didn't get along. They are polar opposites in a lot of ways. I mean, I know Bruce Arians gave Tom Brady a whole lot more freedom than Bill Belichick ever did. But at the same time, it feels like this was a Tom Brady power move here. That probably one of the requirements or one of the stipulations for him to come back for another year and play at Tampa may have been that Bruce Arians was no longer the head coach and now Todd Bowles is head coach. But that looks weird. Why didn't you give it to Leftwich? Because he's the OC, and it seems like him and Tom Brady really work together pretty well there. I mean, is it Tom Brady offense? Is it Leftwich? I think there's probably a little bit of a combination of the two. I mean, some people look at this, I think, as maybe Tom Brady's heading out. I know Clay Travis over at Outkick, I saw on Twitter, he had posted something about that. I went into it when Tom Brady announced he was coming back. I didn't believe he actually was going to play for Tampa. I actually do now. I don't really believe the Miami rumors. I felt like if Tom Brady doesn't play for Tampa, he's either retired or he's playing for the 49ers. But now with this, I kind of feel like this was Tom Brady's move. Bruce Arians is no longer the head coach, and he put out a tweet. I'm not going to, a statement, tweet, Instagram, all that stuff. He put it all on social media. I'm not going to kind of go into what he said, but, thank you, coach, and all that stuff. Stuff you expect Tom Brady to say. Because Tom Brady's never going to come out and say anything bad about anybody. That's just not who he is. But it just feels like Brady wanted him gone, for this year in Tampa, which is the last on his contract. So very interesting. Keep an eye on that. Well, anyways, that's a little bit open, a little Final Four, a little NFL talk there. But now let's jump into my conversation with Brian Jones from popculture.com. All right, joining me on today's podcast, today's featured guest is a longtime friend of the program. He's been a guest of mine since the old Sideline Review days on the radio show on ESPN Dothan. Brian Jones over at popculture.com, where he's a trending sports writer. And Brian, I always appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, of course, Phillip. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, yeah, great to have you on. A fun week having coming back on the podcast. You got to play all the favorites when you return. You got to play the favorites, and you've been one of the best guests on the podcast. Always look forward to having you on. And man, I just with you, what you guys have been having going on over at popculture.com. I know you always getting to talk to some interesting people within sports, pop culture, and everything. What's been some interesting stuff you've been able to do here lately?
So, as you mentioned, I'm a trending sports and entertainment writer for popculture.com. I cover mostly sports, but also dabble into entertainment. So I got to talk to a bunch of cool people over the last few months. The one that stands out the most, and this happened back in January, so kind of recent, was I got a chance to interview Halle Berry when she was promoting her movie Moonfall. Yeah, so that was quite an experience. Really great to talk to you. Only it was like a 5-minute interview because it was a junket, so you don't have that much time. But yeah, it was really cool to talk to her. I also got to, before the Super Bowl, got to talk to Aaron Andrews. That was a really great conversation. I also got to talk to NFL legends like Sean Alexander, London Fletcher. I think this week or tomorrow, actually, I'm talking to NBA star Kevin Love. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Gary Payton. So, it's just been a really fun ride. Got to talk to some really great people and just staying busy. So, Yeah, be sure to check out popculture.com. See not just my work, but what everyone else is doing. We cover a lot of reality TV, movies. Most recently, we covered the Oscars, written a lot about the Will Smith and Chris Rock incident. So be sure to check all that stuff out.
Nothing big happened on Sunday night in the Oscars. Nothing at all.
No, not at all.
I'm going to stick to sports. I won't be touching that one.
Oh yeah.
Getting to talk to all these people. I mean, it's just so awesome. Like Halle Berry and just all the people you get to talk to. Has there been a one that you've got like not right before you interview them, but when you know you're going to interview a person, you kind of have to take a step back and like, whoa, this is a really big person. I'm getting all the people you've talked to are big, but has there been like an all moment when you got to think, wow, I'm getting to talk to this person today?
Yeah, so Halle Berry would be one, but I think the other is Joe Montana. And the last time I talked to Joe Montana was in the fall of last year. And since I've worked at Pop Culture, I've interviewed him 3 different times. And that was and each time it's kind of a surreal moment because I grew up a 49ers fan. I grew up loving Joe Montana and just listening to him talk about the past and his stories about his retirement and how tough that was. I thought it was just really fascinating. So that's another. I think another also is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Again, me being a wrestling fan ever since I was little, Stone Cold Steve Austin was the face of WWE during the Attitude Era, during the late 1990s. And so it was fun talking to him as well. And as you mentioned, it's kind of a surreal moment just talking to all these celebrities, no matter how big or small they are, because they have such extraordinary jobs, whether it's working in movies, TV, or in sports. So those are just some of the few that really stand out. But I really enjoy talking to everyone I interview.
Yeah, well, Stone Cold. I mean, that's topical for this. Coming up here soon with WrestleMania. I guess we can say he's borderline. He's not really having a match, but he's talking.
Yeah.
I watched his interview on Rich Eisen last week.
Yeah.
He sounded like a guy that's about to wrestle a match. I'm just, the way he's been talking about it. I know it's not billed that way, but it feels that way. The way he's talking about it.
It really does. They never said it's a match because he's going to appear on the Kevin Owens show, but it looks like. But that's something that I know before that was officially announced. That's something that he's talked about possibly getting back into the ring because the last time he competed in a official match was against The Rock at WrestleMania 19 years ago. And that was like in 2003. So that should be one of the more interesting things about WrestleMania. I think a lot of people would love to see Stone Cold back, especially in his home state of Texas, because I know they've been trying to get The Rock back, but that might be something that happens for WrestleMania next year because they're going to be in Hollywood. So, WrestleMania is known for having a surprise guests, big stars, and I think Stone Cold returning will be one of the highlights of the 2-night event.
And I think, we'll get it into everybody listening. Brian brought up Stone Cold, so I had to go there. We'll get to we're about to get to the football conversation and other stuff. But I know I watched one of the Kevin Owens promos for it, and he mentioned, could Stone Cold even come up the ramp? And my mind went to that. I said, that is a long walk, and I know he's getting in good shape, but he's still, he's in his 50s. I have to think, and my prediction on that, we're going to get the ATV.
Yeah,
he's going to drive that thing down the ramp. I just feel that's going to have to that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I think that has to happen. I think, because the ATV is something that he's known for during the Attitude Era, so it would make sense. And yeah, you mentioned he's getting older, so we don't know how good a shape he's in, but at the same time, I do believe he has one match left in him. And I think some of these wrestlers do believe that when they're in their 50s or in their 60s, they have at least one more match. I think with Stone Cold, the fact that he hasn't really taken too many bumps over the years because of his neck injury, he should be in pretty good shape. But at the same time, he hasn't competed in a match for 19 years. So, again, it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm really curious to see how the WWE plans this out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a side note, my best favorite memory of him with the ATV was this was before Teddy. This was way back now for everybody. This was before Teddy Long was the general manager of SmackDown. He was the manager for Mark Henry, I think, and I remember Stone Cold chasing him around the ring with his ATV and chasing him all the way to the back. I don't know why that memory just always pops in my head. But anyways, somebody got the interview back in the fall. I know you got to talk to Matt Ryan while he was still a member of the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, he's now going to the Colts. Just what was your whole takeaway from Matt Ryan, no longer being a Falcon? Obviously, the Deshaun Watson, I mean, it looked like he was going to Atlanta. Then all of a sudden, I guess because the Browns offered more money than they were going to do before, he changed his mind. He goes to Cleveland, and then, I mean, I don't know. You didn't really see anything like maybe Matt Ryan was upset. I'm sure he was, and probably felt a degree of disrespect from this franchise that he's been quarterback and he's been the face of since 2008. But I mean, he goes a good situation for the Colts. But what was your whole take on that whole situation?
Yeah, I think it was something that trading Matt Ryan was something that the Falcons needed to do, because they've never said they're having a rebuild, but it is a rebuild based on what they have in the salary cap, some of the releases, and some of the players that they let go. How they handled it, I really didn't like, because of the whole Deshaun Watson situation. I think Matt Ryan deserved. I think he deserved a lot better, in the sense that, and he said there was communication between him and the coaching staff and the front office staff when it comes to the whole Deshaun Watson trade. But I think in that situation, it was just difficult, because he's done so much for this franchise and for this city. Because when he entered in 2008, the Falcons didn't just hire Mike Smith. They hired Thomas Dimitroff as a general manager. This came right after Bobby Petrino left the team and joined Arkansas. Then Michael Vick was in federal prison. So he was coming into an unstable situation. And he was the most stable thing for this franchise over the last 14 years. So it's tough to see him go, just because of what he brought to the franchise. Before Matt Ryan got there, the Falcons had never had back-to-back winning seasons. And once he established himself, they had 5 straight winning seasons. He won Offensive Player of the Year in 2016. He won MVP that same year, led the team to a Super Bowl. And in his rookie season, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. He has a resume to be a borderline Hall of Famer, but because of not having help on the offensive line, not having help on defense, the Falcons Matt Ryan was never able to lead the Falcons to a Super Bowl win, despite being close in 2016. And I think because of the roster decisions that Thomas Dimitroff made over the years, that led to the team struggling. They haven't had a winning season since they last went to the playoffs in 2017. So they needed a change. And with Matt Ryan being older, the coaching staff and the new coaching staff led by Arthur Smith, and then the front office led by Terry Fontenot, feel like it's time to take a step in the direction where they need to start over and get their quarterback of the future. Whether it's this year in the draft or next year, it's going to happen. So, again, I hate to see him go, but I think it's necessary. And I do like the situation he's in with the Indianapolis Colts, because, they've been looking for a quarterback ever since Andrew Luck retired. They had Carson Wentz last year. That didn't necessarily work out. Phil Rivers was there the year before. And I think with Matt Ryan going to a Colts team that has a good offensive line, they have an all-pro running back, Jonathan Taylor, a solid wide receivers led by Michael Pittman, and I think he has a chance to be very successful. So I wish Matt Ryan the best. I know a lot of Falcons fans here in Atlanta are going to be rooting for Matt Ryan when he's with the Colts.
Yeah, and with him now in the South, in the AFC South, I look at it obviously that division, no one expects the Texans or the Jaguars to be competitive, for that division. And I look at the Colts and the Titans kind of, the two teams, and I think actually Matt Ryan could be what separates the two because I trust him a whole lot more than I do Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I take Matt Ryan, and I know, Derrick Henry's, listed, regarded as the best back, but Jonathan Taylor was, a guy that was talked about for the MVP toward the end of the year, and you saw this team was 9-8. But at the end of the year, they fell apart against Jacksonville. So tremendous, opportunity to win a division. I'm just thinking, Matt Ryan, you just went into a very tough conference as a whole, though, because with all the teams you're going to, you got Buffalo, the Ravens will be better. You got the Bengals, the Browns. We'll see what they are with Deshaun Watson and how many games he plays. I mentioned the Titans, and you've got the whole AFC West. So I think. If you're not in the AFC West, you just better win your division in 2022 because that's going to be tough. But I think the Colts got, with Matt Ryan now, had all the capabilities of doing so.
Yeah, and I think because of the weapons Matt Ryan has around him, he's not going to be asked to do a whole lot. Last year he wasn't able to throw for 4,000 yards for the first time in like 10 or 11 years. He only threw 20 touchdowns. And that, again, as I mentioned, a lot of it has to do with the inconsistencies on the offensive line and not having a running game and not having a great defense. Matt Ryan's going to have all that. Now, as you mentioned, the AFC is going to be super competitive. It's going to be a challenge. But I think when it comes to the AFC South, I think because of Matt Ryan being able to – he still has his intelligence, still knows where to go to football at all times. The Colts have a chance to be very successful and win the AFC South. Now, once they get to the playoffs, it's going to be a different story because of teams like the Bengals, like the Chiefs. The Raiders got better. The Buffalo Bills are looking to take that, get over that hump. So it's going to be challenging, but this might be, getting Matt Ryan might be the missing piece that the Colts need to get back into the Super Bowl picture. So it's going to be very fun to see the AFC in 2022.
And on the Falcons, of course, they did sign Marcus Mariota, but they do have the 8th pick. And this is a team that needs a lot. They need receivers because you're not going to have Calvin Ridley. Because his suspension for a year. Kyle Pitts is there, but you need more at receiver. This team just needs a lot. They need offensive line. They need a lot of stuff. But of course, if you got quarterback, and this is not regarded as one of the better quarterback classes coming in, but at that 8th spot, do you think Atlanta should go with quarterback, have somebody for the future so, they could maybe learn behind Mariota, or do you think they need to go in a different route when it comes to that number 8 pick?
I think when it comes to this year's draft, I think they should hold off on a quarterback until next year. They could draft a quarterback in the later rounds just for depth, but I think next year's class, led by Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, is going to be a lot stronger. Wide receiver, they could actually hold off on that until the mid to later rounds of this year because the wide receivers class is deep. So I think when it comes to that number 8 pick, if Charles Cross or Trayvon Walker, those guys are available, they should take them because they need a little bit of everything, whether it's offensive line, wide receiver, running back, quarterback, secondary. I would like to see – I don't know if Trayvon Walker is going to be there at 8, but I would love for the Falcons to get him because he can play off the edge and in the inside. He's a guy that I saw quite a bit at the University of Georgia. Even though his numbers weren't that strong, Georgia would always rotate defensive linemen, so no one really stood out when it comes to sacks. But he's been impressive, the combine, impressive with his workouts. So if I was the Falcons, I would go in that direction. They may have to go with the best player available, and that could be, depending on how the first 7 picks go, they could go a number of different ways. Or they could just trade down and just add more draft picks because they have 2 second-round and 2 third-round picks. I think with a team that's so depleted when it comes to the depth chart on both sides, they got to add as many draft picks as possible. And plus, when you don't have that much salary cap space this year, next year is different because they'll have close to $90 to $100 million for the cap space. I think they just adding draft picks, adding those younger guys to help rebuild this roster is essential. So the Falcons have plenty of options in this draft, and it's going to be interesting to see which road they take at number 8 overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, going in that question, yeah, quarterback, but you need a little bit of everything. So it's not like one position is going to like fix everything in the first round. Just team build. You got, pretty much, as you said, with the Matt Ryan, topic, hitting, the rebuild. The rebuild is on now officially, all 100% for the Falcons. Team is not rebuilding, but they got to rebuild a receiving corps. That's the Green Bay Packers team you used to cover over at 24/7 Sports. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is coming back, 3-year, $150 million, but then Devontae Adams is out. And apparently Aaron Rodgers knew that was a possibility going in. They also lose MVS as well. Were you one that thought Aaron Rodgers would come back? I was kind of, in my mind, I was like, he's saying all these positive things about the front office. It seems like they're getting along, so maybe he will. But, the Broncos was out there, Steelers. There were so many different, options to Titans. But were you surprised, or did you think Aaron Rodgers would be returning to the Packers?
So when I asked Erin Andrews that same question, when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and her thoughts on what he's going to do, she said it was pretty much 50-50. She wouldn't be surprised either way. And that's how I feel about it, because I honestly thought he could go to Denver. I honestly thought he could stay and sign a new contract. I also thought he could retire, because he talked about that even last year. So it's not too surprising for him to come back. I think when it comes down to it, it is the best situation. Even though he doesn't have Devontae Adams, and they're going to need some more wide receiver help, because your 2 leading receivers now are Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard. The wide receiver, they have, an extra first-round pick and an extra second-round pick. So they have plenty of opportunities to draft a wide receiver or 2 in this year's draft. So, but yeah, I think when it comes to the upcoming season for Aaron Rodgers and expectations for the Packers, I think for Rodgers, this is the best situation for him to possibly win another Super Bowl. They've come up short the last 3 years for a number of different reasons, but they really don't have that many glaring holes, especially on defense, when they're able to bring back Rasul Douglas. Jair Alexander will come back 100% healthy, able to bring back Devontae Campbell also. So they're going to be pretty strong defensively. It's just going to be that wide receiver position. And I think if they're able to get 1 or 2 in the draft in the early rounds, I think they'll be fine, because you know what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. You know what you have in Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Robert Tonyan should come back strong next year. Veteran tight end Mercedes Lewis, we're going to get out of him. And David Bakhtiari, their best offensive lineman, should come back 100% healthy as well. So for Rodgers to come back to the Packers, it made the most sense, because it gives him the best chance to win a Super Bowl before his career is said and done. Now, as I mentioned, they've struggled. They've come up short the last few years, but I do believe they're going to be one of the favorites to get back in the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, and I think with him, it does matter, and it doesn't matter what he does in the regular season, because it's all the attention, I think, is going to get more momentum, I think, next year, because you look at the last 2 seasons, they're 7-0 without Devontae Adams. I don't think a lot of people's really talked about that. He's proven he can win in the regular season without him, but it comes out of the playoffs. I feel like Aaron Rodgers sometimes in the postseason, and he does this to an extent in the regular season too, but more in the postseason, he gets very careful with the ball. He doesn't take a lot of risk, because he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. I mean, we've seen that. I think he needs to be a little bit more risky. I mean, don't go out there acting like Brett Favre or anything, just throwing it, in the triple coverage, but take a little bit more risk. Don't be so careful or conservative with the ball. Maybe that's the word I should use, conservative. But at the end of the day, I believe next season that they should win the NFC North. They should be the number 1 or 2. I think it's either going to be them. If we're talking here in March, I think it's either going to be them or Tampa coming out of the NFC, if Tom Brady is still with Tampa Bay when we start the season. But anyways, but the playoffs, I mean, that's going to be where he's got to step up. I mean, he's going to have to lead this team into a Super Bowl. And I don't think it's going to be wait and see for everybody until see what they do in the playoffs next season.
Ultimately, when it comes down to it, Aaron Rodgers is going to have to take over when it comes to the playoffs. And I think, when it comes to his postseason career, the best I've seen him was in 2010 in that divisional round game against the Falcons where he just was unstoppable. And I think if he's that consistent in the postseason, then the Packers can't be beat. But you're right. There are times where he looks timid, where there are times where he's a little bit too conservative. And that's something that you really don't see from Aaron Rodgers in the regular season. And I think this year, again, is going to be interesting because you don't have Devontae Adams, but you do have a Randall Cobb, a guy Aaron Rodgers has known for many years, a guy that can get the job done, even though he's not a playmaker as he once was 8 or 9 years ago, but he can still get the job done. So Aaron Rodgers is going to have all the tools. It's just going to be a matter of him getting the job done in the postseason. They weren't able to do it last year, the year before, or the year before that. And while the window is still open for the Packers, I think Aaron Rodgers knows this year is really a good opportunity for him to get it done because you only get so many chances in the NFL to make a deep postseason run. And if they don't get it this year, who knows what's going to happen in 2023 and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it really feels like with him that's now on a year-to-year basis, right. With his future, and will he play or will he not? Because there's also the talk out there he was considering retiring. So if that was something that was in his mind here, this off season, it's probably going to be there next year too as well. So it's like repeat myself, but it's kind of like feel like it's year to year with them. Not going to go through all of them individually, just, all the quarterback movement here in all season, and Tom Brady retiring and unretiring. A lot of quarterback drama. I mean, you got Baker Mayfield still out there. Jimmy Garoppolo is still, who knows what's going to happen with him. You had the Kyler Murray drama too as well. Then, of course, all these quarterbacks that have moved. Just any of it or what has stood out to you the most?
I think when it comes to all the quarterback movement, the one that stands out to me is kind of Russell Wilson going to Denver. Mm-hmm. Now, he's talked about leaving Seattle even last year, but I'm still surprised that it actually happened just because, last year he was injured. He missed 3 games. They finished 7-10. I thought because of what he established in Seattle, he would like to try to finish his career there. I thought, even though they're not the same team they were 10 years ago, obviously. But I thought with him being 100% healthy, the Seahawks had a chance to make a run in the NFC West. But now he's going in the situation where in Denver, he's going to have some weapons to work with. They're going to have the Broncos have a strong defense. And he's going to an AFC West that's going to be competitive. Because when you talk about Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs, Justin Herbert with the Chargers, and then Derek Carr with the Raiders, that's going to be really fun to see. But I am surprised by that just simply because of what he established in Seattle. But at the same time, over these last few years, we've seen Tom Brady move to New England from Tampa. And we've seen, top quarterbacks or, established quarterbacks move because of they probably don't like the situation or the teams feel like they can do better. So it's really a different situation from what it was 10, 15 years ago, because if you get your franchise quarterback or if you feel that's a franchise quarterback, you're going to do whatever it takes to keep him on the roster for as long as you can. Now you're seeing guys switching teams like it's the NBA. Mm-hmm. And it's really just an interesting trend that we've seen over the last few years. So, but yeah, I think it just makes the 2022 season compelling with all the moves. Obviously, Deshaun Watson going to the Browns, Matt Ryan going into the Colts. You have Marcus Mariota playing for the Falcons. I think it just makes the season more intriguing. And I also think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be – I just only wonder what's going to happen with if this trend continues in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. The NFL quarterback has become equivalent to the NBA superstar when it comes to player empowerment. And I think receiver is getting there too. I mean, we've seen with Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, the contracts they've got, and they've moved different places. But the quarterback, what's going on with them reminds me very much of what you see in the NBA with superstars, with the way they move around and how they're basically in control. So It's kind of last couple of years we've seen it, but this offseason has really kind of shown that the NFL with quarterbacks have shifted that direction.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the contracts that they sign. For the NBA, the contracts they're getting is guaranteed. With the NFL, you don't necessarily see that. And I think players want to be in control of their futures. They want to be in control of their NFL path. So they're going to do, especially with quarterbacks, they're going to do what it takes to make sure they're in the best position to win a Super Bowl. And that's why when the Seattle Seahawks talked about the Wilson trade, because before that, Pete Carroll was like, we're not trading Russell Wilson. That's not going to happen. But after the trade, Pete Carroll, the Seahawks general manager, they were just like, this is something that Russell Wilson wanted, basically. So I think you're seeing that. And even with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers pretty much has control over that team because of his ability to either leave if you wanted to play for another team, he could. So it is kind of like what we're seeing in the NBA. And I think the fact that these contracts aren't guaranteed, the players are going to try to protect themselves as much as they can. So again, I can only wonder what is it going to be like in the next 10 years when it comes to free agency and trades in the NFL.
Yeah, it's not going back the way it was. It's only going more forward. So it will be very interesting how that goes. Getting close to 30 minutes, which is, probably a lot longer than I told you I'd have you on here on the show. Just two quick things before I let you go. And I taught basketball this week on the pod, and everybody thinks I'm just only a football guy. So now I'm really about to blow everybody's mind. I'm going to ask you Atlanta Braves question. And this is a two-part question. I'm going to mold two questions into one. Just for you, obviously what he has meant to the Atlanta Braves and the city of Atlanta, just like Matt Ryan. How surprised were you with how everything went down with the Freddie Freeman part? And the second part of that question is, what is your expectations for the 2022 Atlanta Braves, the defending champion Atlanta Braves, which I know it's got to be nice to hear for anybody that's been a fan and, of that team for so long.
Oh, right. They are the defending champions. But the Freddie Freeman situation is interesting because at first I thought, they'll sign him to what he wants, a 6-year contract, and he'll be back and retire as a Brave. It'll be like what Chipper Jones was with the Braves back in the 90s into the 2000s. But as the lockout rolled on and once the lockout ended and as free agency began, it really did look like he wasn't going to be back with the Braves. And once Alex Anthopoulos made the trade for Matt Olson, you knew then Freddie Freeman's career as a Brave was done. And while it is disappointing, and I would love to see him retire as a Brave, he has. I'm really not upset with him because he has to do what's best for him and his family when it comes to free agency. Now, here in Atlanta, Chipper Jones did a interview on sports on a local sports radio station, and he was pretty upset with how the situation went down with Freddie Freeman because he said free agency is not about money; it's playing where you want to play. And if Freddie Freeman wanted to be a Brave, he could have been a Brave, but it looks like he didn't want to, or at least he wanted to have that 6th year, and the Braves weren't going to match him on that, so he decided to sign with the Dodgers. So even though Freddie has been the face of the Braves since the 2011 season, he was the MVP in 2020. He was a big contributor in the Braves World Series run last year. I'm going to say the Braves might be better than what they were in 2021. I think in 2021, they weren't necessarily the best team. They were the hot team because in the beginning of August, they had a losing record, but they were able to turn it on thanks to Eddie Rosario, Jorge Soler, and Jock Peterson getting those acquisitions. They were able to spearhead the Braves to a World Series run. Now, with the addition of Matt Olson, who's just as talented as Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna should be back in the lineup because he missed half of the season. He'll probably start as a designated hitter. You obviously have Max Fried back. Charlie Morton's coming back from his injury that he suffered in the World Series. Hopefully they get Mike Soroka back sometime in the summer. But you have guys like Ozzie Albies, Dansby Swanson, Austin Riley, who's probably going to be an MVP candidate. Eddie Rosario's back with the team. So this is a team, and even in spring training, and even though those games don't count, spring training, they're looking really strong. So the Dodgers might have the best team in all of baseball, and the addition of Freddie Freeman helps. But the Braves are just as talented, and I think they're going to be there at the end when the regular season comes to an end, and when it comes to playoff time. I think they're a definite World Series contender in 2022.
Yeah, those two, I guess you can say that they have built kind of rivalry now, the Dodgers and the Braves. The last 2 years, that's who's been in the last two remaining in the National League. So it sounds like those three. I mean, those two could have a third round of that this upcoming year if everything goes how it should. Just when you look on paper. And then finally, before I let you go, the Final Four is this Saturday night. Just real quickly, who you got winning on Saturday, and who you think is going to be the national champion this year?
Yeah, I think for the Villanova-Kansas game, it's kind of a toss-up to me because both teams, they're blue bloods. They have that Final Four experience, but I'm going to go with Kansas on that one. I think they've been rocking and rolling throughout this entire tournament. So has Villanova, but I just lean towards Kansas. And as for North Carolina-Duke, obviously that's going to be a huge game with this being Coach K's final season. I can't go against Duke, even though they lost to the Tar Heels at the end of the year in the regular season. I think Coach K will get them in that game on Saturday. And as for the national championship, I think Duke wins it. I think Coach K goes out as a national champion, wins his 7th title, and will go down as one of the all-time greatest coaches in all of sports, and not just college basketball.
He'll get that special walking out into the sunset as a champion. And I agree with you. That's how I think it's going to go down this weekend as well. I think it's going to be Kansas and Duke, and I think Duke's going to because you just can't fight the power of Coach K going right now in this tournament. It seems like it's destiny for him to win that last national championship on his final run. But anyways, Brian, this has been a lot of fun. A good 35 minutes conversation, but we hit on a bunch of topics here on the podcast. I do appreciate you taking the time out coming on. And once again, listeners want to check you out online. Where can they find you and all your work you're doing over at popculture.com?
Oh, of course, Phil. I always appreciate it. Again, guys, I'm a trending sports and entertainment writer for popculture.com. You can find my work at popculture.com or popculture.com/sports. As I mentioned, I got a few interviews this week. I'm interviewing Kevin Love. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing actress Lauren Lapkus, who was on Orange is the New Black, Big Bang Theory, and the show Good Girls. So be sure to check those interviews out once they're posted. It should be sometime next week. I should be interviewing some more people on Thursday. It hasn't been confirmed yet. So again, be sure to check all that out at popculture.com and popculture.com/sports. You can follow me on Twitter. That's at Brian Jones_93. And I'm going to try to bring back my podcast called Always Football Season. I have a lot to talk about, especially what has happened in the Atlanta sports scene. So be sure to keep an eye out. You can get Always Football Season wherever you get your podcast. And we also have a Facebook page. It's called facebook.com/Always Football Season.
All right. Sounds good. Everybody go check all that out that Brian's doing. And once again, Brian, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Anytime, Phillip. Thanks again for having me on.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Once again, thanks to Brian Jones for being on today's show. The podcast will be back on Monday morning. We'll record on Sunday. I'll be joined by Michael Rinker from WDHN. He's a news anchor there, was the sports director, and then transitioned over into the news. We will talk about the Final Four games, and we'll give some predictions for the national championship game for whoever's going to be playing in it on Monday night. And we'll also talk about Michael's broadcasting career here at WDHN in Dothan. We'll talk about that, coming from West Virginia into SEC country. And he is a fan of the Washington Commanders. I got to get used to saying that one. So we'll discuss that and much, much more on the podcast and whatever interesting sports news I think I need to talk about on Monday. I do have 3 spring games this weekend in college football. Syracuse, Michigan, and Louisville are playing spring games this weekend. I'm going to watch all 3 of them this weekend, and I will give some thoughts on that. So I have some spring football games to talk about on Monday's podcast as well. That will more than likely be the open along with Final Four stuff. Remember, you can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Really appreciate it. And check it out on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. And you can email me, sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a great weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend. Final Four, men and women. Spring football games are going to be being played. And hey, for the wrestling fans out there, WrestleMania weekend is here Saturday and Sunday. So plenty of good stuff to take in this weekend. And once again, hope everybody has a great weekend. And as always, let's let kindness be our compass.